In 1647, the Westminster Assembly met in London, England, for the purpose of determining what were the fundamentals of the Christian faith that the English and Scottish churches could agree upon. And they concurred with what is called even today, the Westminster Catechism. The first question of that great document of the church asks this: what is the purpose of man? What is the chief purpose of man? Why is man man? And the answer is that the chief purpose, the end of all things, the conclusion of the whole matter is fear God and enjoy Him forever. This is Michael Chandler. I'm pastor of the Victor Valley Bible Church in Victorville, California. And I'd like to welcome you to this Bible on Our Day podcast, which offers lessons from the Bible on various topics related to theology as well as current issues. What does God have to say about these things is the question we ask and answer from His Word. This time on the subject of, no doubt, what the Westminster divines debated, and that is how to live life. All is vanity, says the preacher. Those who have been exposed to the wisdom of the Jewish scriptures recall this saying from the pen of King Solomon, the third ruler of Israel, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, as he introduces himself in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 1. Solomon is the one who, as a young man, remember, humbly prayed to God for wisdom and was therefore entrusted with a wise and understanding heart, like no one ever before or since, as 1 Kings 3 and verse 12 says. But as he continues in 1 Kings 3 and verse 13, the wisest man who ever lived, as he is so called, the wisest man who ever lived, was also given untold riches and honor. Boundless wisdom and wealth, Solomon had it all. He lived about 70 years of life. God also inspired the king's pen to bequeath significant portions of scripture, such as Psalms 72 and 127, as well as the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. The reign of his kingdom is written of in 1 Kings chapters 1 through 11, and in the parallel texts of 1 Chronicles 29, verse 22 through 2 Chronicles 9 and verse 31. His name, Solomon, appears 289 times in the Bible, including in Jesus' genealogy, Matthew chapter 1, and our Lord's teachings in Matthew 6 and chapter 12, Luke 11 and Luke 12, and also Stephen's sermon before the Jewish Sanhedrin in Acts 7 and verse 47. And yet, with all his spiritual privileges, worldly possessions, and biblical prominence, Solomon evaluated his life and indeed the gamut of human existence as a whole and concluded, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 8. The bookends of this great tome we have in the scripture is that life is a waste, is not worth the living. It's breath, it's vapor. The Hebrew term havel, appearing 38 times in this book, essentially means breath, as in vapor. In fact, his dad, Psalm 39, verses 4 through 6, David, he writes Psalm 39, 4 through 6, asking this question: Lord, make me to know my end, and what is the measure of my days, that I may know how frail I am. Indeed, you have made my days as handbreadths, and my age is as nothing before you. Certainly every man at his best state is but Habel, vapor. Surely every man walks about like a shadow. Surely they busy themselves in vain. He heaps up riches and does not know who will gather them. Well, that's a very, very good summary of much of what Solomon teaches us in the book of Ecclesiastes. Figuratively, this term havel refers to what is transitory, unsatisfactory, and worthless. Solomon, who at the beginning had so much going for him, concluded at the end that life added up to a big zero. How could this be? Well, as the sun of his life was setting, Solomon explains how he came to this sad end and how you and I can avoid it. The king of Israel, first of all, says that we must acknowledge our lives as the gift of God. Do you see your life, the very next breath you take, as a gift of God? That's what Solomon would have us appreciate and acknowledge that our lives are the gift of God. As he begins his tome, Solomon observes that some things continue as they always have, and nothing can be done about it. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, he, he begins by saying the obvious. One generation passes away, another generation comes, the earth abides forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down, hazes to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south, turns around to the north. Wind whirls about continually. All the rivers run into the sea. The sea is not full. On he goes. The cycles of nature remain. Even new things, he says, have been tried before. Is there anything, he says, Ecclesiastes 1, verse 10, of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. Essentially, there's nothing new under the sun. And he concludes the first chapter saying, I've been wise. I know all this stuff. I've examined all these things. I understand great wisdom and knowledge. I'm smarter than everyone who's come before me. All I've learned is that with much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Great privilege leads to great problems. That's how he concludes that first chapter. What's more, as he continues in chapter 2, life spent on pleasure and personal ambitions yields no lasting satisfaction. Indeed, the whole of the second chapter is devoted to the idea of living for the unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. He says, starting in verse 4, I made my works great. I built myself houses, planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards. I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself. I acquired. I had this. I gathered. I became great. It's all me, myself, and I he's living for. And in the end, he says, you know what, Solomon? He's talking to himself. You've lived for yourself, the author bemoans. What do you have to show for it? After all your efforts and hard labor, what will last after you're gone? Fool, you've not acknowledged the hand of God and all the things you've enjoyed in life. Repent and turn again to the author of life. He actually says this, starting in verse 17. I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Who's going to take care of the things after I'm done? He says, after I'm dead and gone, who will take care of the stuff? You might be a wise person, might be a fool. I have no idea, no control over it. I turned my heart and despaired, he says in verse 20, of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. My life has added up to nothing, he says. And so he concludes in Ecclesiastes 2, 24 through 25, the first positive reference to the hand of God. He says, look, nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God, for who can eat and who can have enjoyment without him? I've had it all. I've enjoyed it all as far as myself can go, but I've found that nothing is worth living if it is not lived for him. And this purposeful summary, as we will see, often rises to the surface throughout the rest of the book. So we must first acknowledge, my friend, our lives, your life, my life, is the gift of God. That's what he's saying. And do not live it for the self, live it for God. Now, secondly, we must also submit our lives to the purposes of God. He continues in chapter 3, saying that seasons of life come and go, but God is in charge of all things. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to pluck, a time to plant, a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up. On he goes. And he says, I have seen the God-given task with which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in his time. He's in charge of all of these things, the cycles, the in and out, the time of war, the time of peace, the time of love, the time of hate, the time of death, the time of life. He's in charge of all of this stuff. He has made everything beautiful in his time. Whatever God does, he says, it shall be forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. God does it, that men should fear before him. He says in Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 14. Not only is God in charge of what takes place on this side of eternity, but as it continues in verse 17 of this chapter, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. He continues in chapter 4, speaking about the poor and the oppressed, saying that he considered and saw all the oppression that is done under the sun. Look, the tears of the oppressed, they have no comforter. On the side of their oppressors, there is power, but they have no comforter. He says, I even praise the dead more than the living. Better than both is he who has never existed, he goes on, because there's so much unequal qualities, on earth, and the oppressing people and the oppressive, the folks that are being oppressed. On he goes on and on and on. It's terrible. Chapter 5 and verse 8, he says, if you see the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteousness in a province, do not marvel at the matter. High official watches over high official, higher officials are over them. Nothing's changed. The oppression has been the way of mankind from the beginning. Here, Solomon is writing like the front page of our newspapers, 3,000 years ago. You see the oppression of the poor today? I've seen it then. Don't marvel at the matter. It happens. Not only this, but he continues in chapter 4, saying that the fruits of one's hard work can even go unrewarded if he lives only for himself. He says in verse 8 of chapter 4, there is one alone without companion. He has neither son nor brother, yet there's no end to all his labors, nor is his eye satisfied with riches. But he never asks, for whom do I toil and deprive myself of good? This also, he says, is vanity and a grave misfortune. Chapter 5, verses 10 and following, he says, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? Even popularity is a passing phenomenon of this life. Again, in chapter 4, beginning in verse 13, better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. He comes out of prison to be king, although he was born poor in his kingdom. I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. No end of all the people over whom he was made king, yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. One king passes after another. Oh, maybe he'll have his image embossed on a coin. How wonderful that is. But he's pretty much forgotten. Popularity is a passing phenomenon of this life. God controls all things. We don't. Even our well-meaning promises to him are subject to his providence. In chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, he says, you know what? When you go to the house of God, you need to draw near to hear rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they don't know that they do evil. And he goes on to talk about how the fool will open his mouth and blab all kinds of promises to God. Oh, God, I will do this. I will do this. Just get me out of this problem. And I vow to do this. I vow to do that. And Solomon says, whoa, whoa, hold it. You don't realize God is in heaven. You're on earth. You make promises of what you're going to do tomorrow. You have no idea what tomorrow will hold. Be quiet and listen rather than just a blab a lot. Stop it. Though your promises may be well-meaning, good intended, yes, it's fine, but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Moreover, God may give riches and wealth and honor to a man, but prevent that same man from enjoying those blessings. He says this in chapter 6, verse 1. There is an evil which I've seen under the sun, and it is common among men, A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor so that he lacks nothing for himself of all he desires. Yet God does not give him power to eat of it, but a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity, he concludes, and it is an evil affliction. Wow. And so again, Solomon concludes in chapter 3 and verse 22. Nothing is better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his heritage. For who can bring him to see what will happen after him? Again, in chapter 5, verses 18 through 20, here is what I have seen, Solomon says. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink and to enjoy the good of all his labor in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, which God gives him, for it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, for God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. In chapter 8, as we continue, and verse 15, Solomon again says there, I commended enjoyment because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. For this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life, which God gives him under the sun. In chapter 9, verses 7 through 9, he says, Go, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. Let your garments always be white, and let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity. For that is your portion in life and in the labor which you perform under the sun. Yes, yes. Submit our lives to the purposes of God. And when God blesses, enjoy it. That's what he's saying. Now, finally, not only must we acknowledge God in giving us as a gift the life we live, but we all must also submit our lives to the purposes of God, yes, recognizing he controls all things, we don't. But finally, we must live our lives in view of the judgment of God. This theme we find throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. In chapter 7, as we continue, he says, A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Yes, funerals for the dead are good, for the frivolous who still live, because all must receive the wages of sin. Man's continuous and inherent sinfulness calls us to consider the work of God. In Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 20, he merely states the obvious that there is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin. In verses 27 through 29, he says, Here is what I have found, says the preacher, adding one thing to the other to find out the reason, which my soul still seeks, but I cannot find. One man among 1,000 I have found, but a woman among all these I have not found. Truly this only I have found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. Yes, Solomon believed in original sin. He believed in the sin nature passed down from our first parents, Adam in the garden, to his progeny, including you and me. We have sought out many schemes. God made man upright in the beginning, but we have since, by Adam's fall in the garden, sought out many schemes, and we are wicked at heart. And so we must consider the work of God. Verse 13. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. God is in control of all things. You aren't. Consider the work of God. Also, please God, chapter 7, verse 26. Listen to this. He says, I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be trapped by her. Sexual immorality pervades our culture, even as in Solomon's day. And he says the way to avoid this trap, this enslavement, of sexual morality is to please God. Furthermore, fear before God, chapter 8 and verses 12 through 13. He says, a sinner does evil 100 times, and his days are prolonged. Yet I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, nor will he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because it does not fear before God. There are many iniquities in life, he continues, things that ought to be that aren't. He says in verse 14, there is a vanity which occurs on earth, that there are just men to whom it happens according to the work of the wicked. Again, there are wicked men to whom it happens according to the work of the righteous. I said, this also is vanity. There are some things in life that just don't make sense. Chapter 10, verses 5 through 7. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, as an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. I have seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the ground like servants. These are inexplicabilities, and they are very frustrating. But regardless of our spiritual or social status, as much as we might protest or complain or stomp our feet, all die. Ecclesiastes 9, verses 1 through 3. I considered all this in my heart so that I could declare it all, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. People know neither love nor hatred by anything they see before them. All things come alike to all. One event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good, the clean, and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As is the good, so is the sinner. He who takes an oath as he who fears an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that one thing happens to all. Truly, the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. All go to the grave, he says in verse 10 of chapter 9. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. And he says in chapter 8, verses 7 through 8, no one has power in the day of death. Chapter 10, verse 14, no man knows what is to be, nor do we have any control over the future. Chapter 11, only God who makes everything knows all things. Yes, we must live our lives as vaporous as they are, as short as they are, as shadow-like as they are, nonetheless in view of the judgment of God. So yes, acknowledge our lives as the gift of God. Submit our lives to the purposes of the sovereign God, and live our lives in view of the judgment of God. And so the author concludes in chapter 11, verses 9 through 10. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these God will bring you into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh. For childhood and youth are vanity. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. And so the author concludes, live out the gift of God to the fullest. Go for it. Send it. Leave nothing in the tank. Only know that for all these, God will bring you into judgment. Remember now your Creator, the King of Israel counsels. Concluding with the whole matter, even as our Westminster friends did in Ecclesiastes 12, 13 through 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. Well, my friend, 2026 is upon us, but today is the first day of the rest of your life, the rest of my life. What we do with it needn't add up to a big zero, as Solomon repented of. Rather, when we live for the glory of God as he would counsel, life makes sense and is altogether worth the living. Let me encourage us to hide away in our hearts. Ecclesiastes 12, verses 13 through 14. Again, where the king of Israel concludes the whole matter, saying, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil." Ecclesiastes 12, 13 through 14. I'm Michael Chandler, pastor of Victor Valley Bible Church, located at 16439 Hughes Road in Victorville, where we invite you to worship with us on any given Lord's Day. Our services are held on Sunday mornings at 10:15. See us also on YouTube, or for more information, please visit our website at www.victorvalleybiblechurch.com or email at bibletron@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you as you live out the Bible in your day.